Over the years, Thor's collected quite the arsenal. Throughout the comics and the MCU, he's used many different versions of his legendary hammer, Mjolnir. Some of these are imbued with dark magic, while some do a lot more than call forth thunder. Plus, hammers aren't the only thing he swings. Let's go over every weapon the God of Thunder's wielded. Mjolnir. You guys already know this one, but the movies don't actually tell you everything about it. And trust me, there's a lot. For example, the whole thing, from the hilt to the hammer, is made of uru, a mystical ore that's one of the strongest minerals in the multiverse. Uru is actually so hard to forge that it had to be melted in the heart of a sun to forge a mold with which he could create the weapon. And by the way, the forging itself sent shockwaves through the cosmos. It shook Asgard, almost killed the Smiths, and sent a rain of meteors down to the world. One of these was Earth. Some comic interpretations even suggest Mjolnir's creation was responsible for the extinction of the dinosaurs. Plus, the name? It translates to that which smashes, or lightning, and that's pretty accurate considering that anything gets pulverized the moment it makes contact with this thing, unless you're Thanos or Cap's shield, apparently. It was built by the dwarf master smiths, Eitri and Buri, figures also inspired by Norse mythology, like the one seen in God of War. The origin story for this has been changed a few times. In a few comics, the creation of Mjolnir wasn't that grand. Recently, in Mighty Thor number 12, the writers made the hammer even more mystical. Basically, before, it used to be Odin's enchantments and magic that gave it the whole weather control. But in this storyline, apparently, Odin trapped a sentient storm, a cosmic power that had been around forever inside the Uru that was used to make Mjolnir, and he did that after defeating said cosmic storm in a massive battle. In this case, Mjolnir even has a bit of personality, but that's not always true. It was forged by master dwarfs, using things like suns and planets, and it was enchanted by Odin so that only the worthy could lift it, gaining the power of the God of Thunder if they did.
I knew it.
Black Mjolnir. On Earth 14325, this is the weapon of Thor, a much more evil and tyrannical version of the classic Thor. The differences are more than just an extra R in the name, though. First appearing in a flashback in Avengers Volume 5, number 25, the weapon's enchantment is a direct inversion of Odin's original spell. Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be unworthy, shall possess the power of Thor. This Thor also has a massive ego. Once, he even killed people for not bowing down to him in respect. The Earth 14325 Thor isn't the only one who used this hammer. Even the Earth 616 version took it up. During Jonathan Hickman's Infinity event, Thor actually became unworthy of Mjolnir and lost a good chunk of his power. But he still needed it to battle the multiversal threat known as the Black Priests, and Thor eventually claimed this hammer. Though it did corrupt him a bit, causing him to be a lot more brutal and reckless. The entire thing about this alternate Earth is that it's pretty much opposite day. Here, the Avengers are dictators that rule over Earth, instead of being its mightiest heroes, and that's why the hammer is a complete 180 from the usual script. In terms of power, though, it's pretty much the same thing. There's a much more evil, demonic version that's kind of similar to this one, although it's based off the classic Mjolnir. It's known as the Devil's Hammer, Helnir, and it was created by the King in Black, Bedlam's child. Instead of lightning, though, it spews out hellfire, and it's a pretty busted variant. Ultimate Mjolnir. The Ultimate Mjolnir, originating from Earth 1610, is arguably the most visually distinct and lore-heavy alternate hammer in Marvel history. It actually shares a lot of similarity with the MCU's Stormbreaker, especially in its design. First, let's just set one thing straight. Ultimate Mjolnir sounds like some final boss version of the weapon, but it's really just a version of Mjolnir from the Ultimate Universe. And it has nothing to do with Asgardians or magic. Instead, it was created by the European Defense Initiative alongside a specialized biomechanical suit for Thorleif Gullman, the man who would become the Ultimate Thor. The weapon was entirely technological, housing a massive power supply that allowed for teleportation, weather manipulation, and ion projection. It wasn't until much later in the Ultimate continuity that Thor's actual godhood was confirmed. This version can't be recalled out of nowhere, and it also doesn't have the worthiness restriction. It's definitely one of the most unique takes on the weapon, and despite not being enchanted by the Allfather, it actually holds up pretty well in terms of power. Golden Cosmic Mjolnir. This might be the most powerful version of Mjolnir on the whole list, and wielded by Thor at arguably his strongest. At this point in the timeline, Thor has finally succeeded his father and sits on the throne as the Allfather, possessing the full might of the Odin Force. But his troubles have also upgraded quite a bit, and this time he has to contend with the Black Winter, a sentient cosmic plague that destroys entire realities. And by the way, here's how Galactus looks in front of the Black Winter. This isn't something either of the two can take alone, so they team up, and Thor actually becomes a herald of Galactus. The Planet Eater imbues him with the power cosmic. We get one of the hardest panels of Thor, like, ever. And he has a new roided out Mjolnir to boot. The thing is literally glowing with cosmic energy. Thor actually finds out that Galactus may be the reason the Black Winter is here, and in a pretty rage-filled moment decides to pulverize Galactus. This version is actually that powerful. All it took to defeat someone that's been an Avengers-level threat and more was a swing with this Mjolnir. Power scaling in comics has always been all over the place, but you rarely see a feat like this. It did take all of his newly found cosmic power though, and after he was done, Thor rose from the corpse of Galactus with none of his strength left. Stormbreaker. This weapon is an absolute beast, and its history is equally as epic. In the MCU, Stormbreaker is the ultimate king's weapon, designed to be the greatest creation in the history of Asgard. After Hela shatters Mjolnir, Thor needs something that can cut Thanos in two, and he travels to a dead Nidavellir to get it. Thor literally has to hold open the frozen iris of a dying star, taking the full concentrated heat of a sun just to melt the Uru metal. And when the metal cools and they can't find the handle, Groot does one of the most metal things we've ever seen in the MCU. As far as weapons go, this is easily one of the strongest ones in the MCU. We literally saw it cut through a beam from the Power Stone. Very few have been shown capable of wielding it, including Captain America.
No, give me that. You have the little one.
But who's worthier than that guy? Except maybe Spider-Man. Speaking of worthiness, it has no enchantment. Since Odin wasn't around to place one on it, it could technically be wielded by anybody, really. Arguably one of Thor's most powerful states in the MCU. That scene of him entering Wakanda with the Stormbreaker in hand lives rent-free in my head. In the comics, though, Stormbreaker wasn't even made for Thor. It was actually made for Beta Ray Bill, who had the weapon forged after he beat Thor in a fair fight and claimed Mjolnir. Plus, he could lift it too. Odin was actually so impressed with the guy that he had the dwarves of Nidavellir create a new hammer for him. Jarnbjorn. Long before he was the wise Avenger or the Allfather, Thor was a brash, arrogant Viking god who loved nothing more than drinking ale and brawling. This made him unworthy, so he didn't have Mjolnir.
Unworthy of these realms, unworthy of your title! You're unworthy! I now take from you your power!
But the guy had to use something, and that's where Jarnbjorn came in. Forged by the same dwarven blacksmiths in Nidavellir who would later craft his hammers, Jarnbjorn is a massive, indestructible battle axe. Its name literally translates to Iron Bear, and it is completely savage. It doesn't have the magical weather-manipulating enchantments of Mjolnir, nor does it return to his hand when thrown. It's just an insanely sharp, heavy, perfectly balanced piece of Asgardian metal designed for pure, unadulterated hacking and slashing. It also has a charm placed on it that makes it pretty much indestructible. Jarnbjorn's most famous early feats happened during the Viking Age in the 9th century. Young Thor uses this axe to battle frost giants, slay dragons, and most importantly, fight Gore the God Butcher for the very first time. Gore was slaughtering deities across the cosmos with the Necrosword, and Thor goes toe-to-toe with him, even managing to chop off Gore's arm. Frogjolnir. You can't really talk about Thor's arsenal without mentioning Frogjolnir. Did you think Loki was the only brother to have animal variants? We're going to go back to Walt Simonson's Thor number 364 here. Loki pulls a petty prank, which ends up turning Thor into a frog. Yep, even that happened. Thor ends up in Central Park and gets dragged into a full-scale turf war between the local frogs, rats, and insects. During this harrowing, traumatizing conflict, he meets another human-turned-frog named Puddlegulp, who used to be a guy named Simon Walterson before a mystic cursed him. When Thor eventually reclaims his normal hammer and leaves to force Loki to change him back, his magical goat, Tooth Gnasher, accidentally chips off a tiny sliver of Mjolnir with its hoof. This little chunk of enchanted Uru metal is just sitting there in the mud. Puddlegulp, having fought bravely alongside the Odin son, steps up and lifts the sliver. Because he is pure of heart and a true warrior, he is totally worthy. The second he lifts it, that tiny sliver transforms into Frogjolnir, a miniature, perfectly functioning replica of Mjolnir. It's actually one of the silliest things to ever come out of a Marvel comic book. But the real question is, Throg versus Alligator Loki, one-on-one, no Frogjolnir. Who's taking this, guys? All bets are on. Well, that's about it for Thor's extensive arsenal throughout the comics and MCU. Honestly, the movies haven't really delved deep into his bag. Plus, he uses a lot more than just the hammers and Stormbreaker. Thor's even wielded the Odin sword before. So, what's your favorite weapon? And since we know Chris Hemsworth still has a few movies left in him, what's something you'd like to see from the comics?